Hi, I'm Judith Leblein, and welcome again to Conversations. You know, one of the joys about having your own show like this is that you can pick and choose who your guests are. And today's guest is not only someone who has achieved a great deal in her career, but a good friend of mine who was recently honored, and I've asked her to join us today. And joining us is Shanon Karmazin, the president of the Karma Foundation, and Michael Stotts, the managing director of the George Street Theater. Sharon, what a delight to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. It is a reunion. Well, one of the joys of my long time in East Brunswick was the friendship between you and I, and it still lasts, and I'm thrilled by that. And your award, most recently, the Thomas H. Kane Arts Advocacy Award, well deserved. How excited were you?
Well, I'm still floating. It was Saturday night. We had a wonderful gala at the Hyatt Regency with over 400 people. The room was filled, and we had a marvelous evening with great entertainment and wonderful food and terrific people, and I'm still floating. I'm a little bit, maybe 6 inches off the ground.
Now, coming to East Brunswick Television Studios is really a homecoming for you because you spent a good deal of your career right here in East Brunswick as director of our fabulous library. How long were you here in your position?
Well, I was in the library for 32 years, and I was director for the last 11 years. And when I left, it was Channel 8, and now it's Channel 3 with a whole new face. So I'm very pleased to be back.
32 years. It had to be bittersweet to leave. I know you just absolutely love the library, and so much growth under your direction. What was next for Shanon Karmazin?
Well, it was a great career here, and I just found that I came to a point where I had a lot of other interests that I didn't have time to pursue because of my commitments here, and made the decision that it was time for a change, that, you know, you never know what the future is going to bring in the way of health and feeling good. And while I still am, and while I'm young enough, there were a number of things I wanted to pursue, among them work with some nonprofit organizations in the community, and, you know, volunteer work that I could do to help in a lot of areas, not just library work.
Well, library work, long your passion, but there's another passion that drives you, that brought you this award, and that is love of the theater. How did that start?
Well, I guess it started as it does with most people, and I think virtually anybody you ask who's ever been to live theater can tell you the story of the moment they were grabbed. And for me, it was when I was a very little girl. Every year, my mother would buy tickets for me, and my aunt would take me to a show on my birthday. And the first year, it was The King and I with Yul Brynner, and then it was Kismet, and then it was Damn Yankees, and it didn't take me long to get hooked. When you talk to people, everybody has a story like that, whether it is a high school show they were in, whether it is a community theater production they've seen, or a Broadway show. You know, once you see it and once it's meaningful to you, it really does change your life. And unfortunately, unlike so many talented people who can sing and dance and produce and act, I'm just a great audience.
Now, would that little 8-year-old girl ever have imagined that at some point in her life she would be producing an off-Broadway play, which is one of the things you've done?
Well, it was certainly probably not imaginable when I was 8, but probably from the time I was in high school. I thought, boy, wouldn't that be a great thing to do when I would read the New York Times about people who invested in shows and produced shows. I thought, oh, that would be so much fun. And I finally got to do it this year.
Down the Garden Path in New York, off-Broadway. Tell us about the experience.
Well, it was wonderful. You know, I worked with such great people. First of all, it started because of my involvement here with George Street Playhouse, because Down the Garden Paths originated at George Street. Ann Meara is a great friend of David Saint's and of the theater. He directed her in Afterplay, her first play, and she came to George Street with Down the Garden Paths. And an all-star cast with Eli Wallach and Ann Jackson starring, and it broke all records at George Street. And there were many offers to take it into New York. And it was wonderful to have the opportunity to be in on the ground floor and to have lunch at Joe Allen's with Stiller and Meara and hear their stories, be regaled with their stories of all the people they knew and all the things they had done, and, you know, Jerry Stiller and Seinfeld. So, you know, you feel like you're touched by you know, by the famous and the talented and, you know, stars. So it was lots of fun. We went to opening night. There was a party at the Russian Tea Room, and it was fun. Met Ben Stiller.
Well, some people dream of playing in Yankee Stadium, and some people dream of a career on Broadway, and this dream has come true. Now, the Thomas H. Kane Arts Advocacy Award is presented by the George Street Playhouse to someone who has made a contribution to making the Playhouse more alive and keeping it going. And Michael, tell us a little bit now. As managing director, you work with the board. She's going to kill me, but tell us a little bit about Shanon Karmazin as a board member.
Oh, well, this year we couldn't think of anyone more deserving of this award. It truly is about someone or an organization, and in this case both, Sharon and the Karma Foundation, who provide not only tremendous financial support, which is obviously much needed, but guidance and advice, and will spearhead campaigns and projects for us. And over the last 2 years that I've been here, I've not seen anyone on the board that has done more than Sharon in terms of all of the things that we've asked her to do, and some of the things she's volunteered to do on her own, from decorating an apartment for us, to purchasing vans, to making a surprise grant the other night for new lighting equipment, which we desperately need. So my congratulations again, and great thanks to this incredible woman.
Well, I think the key word in that award is advocacy, and there's no better advocate for public theater than Sharon, and that energy is contagious, so I'm sure that's been a big help to the George Street, that energy that comes from Sharon.
For our staff and for the rest of the board.
Now, we've mentioned the Karma Foundation, your name, Karmazin. Tell me how you came up with Karma Foundation.
Well, actually, that was a job that I assigned to the other board members, who are my two children, Craig and Dina. And Dina and her husband, Andrew, took charge and made a list of possible names. And when we looked at them all, we immediately discarded the Gimme Gimme Foundation and the Open Wallet Foundation, which were on the list. We just thought they sent the absolutely wrong message.
I think so.
And when we started to look at karma and what karma meant, and actually I talked to Jason Stone, who's the director here, who is a little bit of a Buddhist,
yes,
and talked about the meaning of karma and the message that it sent. We really thought, you know, that interesting word and the meaning and the idea of being part of a continuation of life and being part of humanity really did represent what we wanted. And it was certainly I knew I didn't want a foundation that had my name. I didn't want the Shanon Karmazin Foundation, which a lot of people do. But the idea of having something that contained part of our name and also a word that was meaningful to us seemed to really work for us. And people love it. When they realize what it is and they realize our name, they say, wow, that's very cool.
And the act of giving back good karma, I think that's just a great idea. Just a great concept. Now, the basic premise behind the foundation for assisting community organizations, what are some of the goals of the Karma Foundation? Well,
we work primarily in the areas in which the three of us live, that being New Jersey locally and the state of New Jersey more widely, Wisconsin where Craig is, and the Los Angeles area where Dina is. And we do fun projects in all of those areas, and the projects are fairly, widely based in the areas of arts and culture, and of course educational and literacy, which are things I've always been interested in. Also health and human services, and the furtherment of Jewish life. So we cast a fairly wide net.
Now, in regards to the mission about family life and Jewish family life, a project that came through the George Street Theater, funded by the Karma Foundation, a project about Anne Frank. Tell us quickly about that.
Well, actually, that was something that I was involved with before there was ever a foundation, because it goes back more than 5 years, and the foundation really is only about 4 years old. And at that point, one of the staff at George Street, who was in charge of outreach, which is the tremendous program that we have that goes into the schools all over the state, serves 80,000 students a year, was looking for a vehicle to be used in Holocaust education. And there was a meeting of 2 Holocaust survivors, one of whom lives in London and one of whom lives in New Jersey, who were connected to Anne Frank in their lives. And a play was developed around them. It was commissioned and written by the playwright James Still, called "And Then They Came for Me." And the play, which talks about the experience of these two people who are now elderly, but were at that time teenagers, the same age as Anne Frank, and they were connected to her, is a play that he wrote that has traveled through the schools and has been seen by hundreds of thousands of students, and actually is being produced all over the country now. I know it was a pleasure to be in Philadelphia last year and see a poster in a window that it's being done there, to go to Arizona and see that it's being done there. So it's a play that is good enough to have a life of its own at this point. And I was one of the original funders. You know, I remember we had a reading at my house and we invited people the old-fashioned way, I'm told. They call it a backer's audition, and even though it wasn't a reading for commercial production, we brought people in who we thought would be interested in it, and got people to donate. And the New York Times Foundation was also a major donor that made the production happen, and it has toured for 6 years. It's still being done by George Street, and schools can still have it come in. A study guide has been developed so that teachers can use it as part of a comprehensive study of the Holocaust, and Holocaust education, of course, is mandated in New Jersey. But now we're taking it to the next level, and we've just provided a $5,000 grant to commission a second play, because so many have seen this one, and we're really ready to go on to other stories that need to be told, because there are millions of stories.
Now, Michael, this seems to be the George Street story, because so many things have started at George Street, and there may be a lot of our viewers today that aren't aware of the success that George Street has meant to many pieces of work that have started at George Street. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think in the last 3 years especially, we're starting to become more and more recognized for some of the things we are sending out into the world. Certainly, And Then They Came For Me, which did start 6 years ago, has had a tremendous impact, and is probably, of the plays commissioned by George Street, had the biggest impact, and it's now going international. There are productions scheduled for Latvia, Australia,
What a compliment
Germany.
to the piece and to the George Street Theater.
It's incredible for us. But under David Saint, the artistic director who's been with us for 3 years now, he's really refined the mission to be focused on the development of new work, primarily for our main stage, but also for the touring company. And over the last 3 years, he has developed several new plays, Down the Garden Path being one of them, that have had a larger life and a longer life beyond the 4-week run that we are able to do at George Street. We have a new musical right now that starts a workshop today that will be produced off-Broadway this fall, called The Spitfire Grill.
Which was fabulous. I've seen it.
Which was an incredible
Fabulous.
production, and our fingers are crossed that it has tremendous success in New York. Again, Down the Garden Paths, a play called Syncopation we produced last year that has not yet been produced in New York, but has been being produced around the country. So there are a tremendous amount of things that are going on here. We like to be the incubators of new word. Proof.
Oh.
Of course.
Pulitzer Prize winner.
Pulitzer Prize winner as of about
Big hit in Broadway.
a few weeks ago, and is continuing to run on Broadway, and that started in one of our developmental workshops.
You know it's a success when Hollywood starts lining up wanting to do a guest piece in Proof. And when you hear things like that, you know that it's really made it.
Well, I know if viewers should know that if they come to a reading at George Street, they never know what they're going to see for a new play, because they might see a Proof before anybody else does in development.
Right.
That's how Proof started.
Well, that is really a tribute to the George Street Playhouse and to the state of New Jersey, which, when you say incubator, I mean, New Jersey is just filled with so many experiences in the arts, in theater, quality experiences, when right across the river, we have the Mecca for live theater. And it's interesting that you bring up this idea of being the incubator. We see in New York, when you talk about theater, and there was a brief time there where I was really afraid as theaters started to close. It was harder and harder to get people into New York to see a Broadway show. It's vital to have a place to bring these new pieces. Commercially, they're bringing everything back. 42nd Street, again, back, because they're pressed to make this money. But how important George Street is to starting new projects to keep that going for the next generation.
I think that's what's unique about our mission. There are a lot of theaters throughout the country that do focus on the development of new work, but certainly in New Jersey, we are the one theater that is dedicated to that. Yeah. While you can see a recent New York hit at our theater and occasionally a classic, the focus really is on the development of new work. And doing it, though, comes with a tremendous amount of risk, because when you're producing works that don't have any name recognition, sometimes the writers, sometimes a star perhaps, it's difficult to raise money for it, it's difficult to develop an audience for it. And so what we're trying to do right now, we want to maintain this mission, but we're trying to find ways to financially continue to make it work for us. And it is, like I said, a tremendous risk. The benefits are that we are close to New York, so we can attract the New York critics, certainly New York actors, directors, producers. We're only 45 minutes away, so they're able to come out here and see our work firsthand. And that, I think, is starting to raise our profile, not just in the city, but nationally.
I think, as evidenced the other evening at Cinco de Mayo, the gala, is that once people get into the doors of the George Street, they are excited and energized and want to do everything they can to nurture it. I'm sure of that from what I saw in evidence of that evening.
One of the biggest challenges is getting them in the doors in the first place.
Exactly.
Because I think you're right. Once they've come, they will come back again.
Right. When people have to make a choice about their entertainment dollar, quite often they want to go with a known. And I think the joy of live theater is the surprise you get out of a syncopation or a proof.
Absolutely.
You know, absolutely. If you're just joining us, with me today on Conversations is Shanon Karmazin, the recent award winner of the Thomas H. Kane Arts Advocacy Award and member of the George Street Playhouse Board, and Michael Stotts, managing director of the George Street Theater. Let's talk a little bit about theater. What is it about George Street that brings so many internationally recognized performers? I mean, give us a little litany of who's been there. It's amazing.
Certainly in the last year, Ann Jackson, Eli Wallach, Ann Mira, Chita Rivera, the list goes on and on. We did a production last year where we revolved 4 different casts, a total of 20 actors that included Fred Savage and Paul Rudd and Frances Sternhagen and Jane Powell. It was
and in that
incredible.
Format, you were sitting in a small room. You could reach out and touch them. I mean, many people don't have that opportunity.
For any of our shows, it's a very intimate space, and so you almost feel like you're in the living room with any of these world-class artists that have come to our stage. It's all a stroke of not just luck, but relationships primarily, I think, that David Saint has developed over the last several years.
No one can say no to David Saint, I'm convinced.
No.
I hope not.
No.
And
If they say no, it's because they're not available.
I'm convinced.
But we'll get them at some point.
Right.
But it really is about relationships, and that, in fact, is what the theater is all about. It's about developing relationships, whether it's with writers, directors, actors, with funders. I mean, it's all an extension of, a family.
Besides the experience that the performers have, both with the staff, with the board, how do they feel about the people of Central Jersey that come to the theater? Do they pick up the vibe of the people that love the George Street? I mean, do you get feedback like that?
Well, a little bit, I suppose. It's a very different audience out here than it is in New York, for example, where to produce new plays, it's not as difficult. Well, it is difficult, but the audience is built in there. So here, it's a little different trying to market something that people haven't heard of. And now, after 3 years, we're starting to recognize themes that our audience enjoy, performers that our audience enjoys, a certain writer or writers that our audience enjoys. And so we start looking at that in terms of our programming. But you certainly do hear comments from the audience, and certainly the actors talk about how different our audience is out here. I think the audience takes on the character of the neighborhood and the community in which you live, and therefore your art needs to be an extension of that as well. And so you always have to have a dialogue going with the members of the community, with your board, with the staff, about what it is, what are the hot buttons here that are going to make people want to come and see our theater.
Well, let's talk a little bit about theater in general. In New Brunswick, right here, you don't have to go across the river, you don't have to make it, make the trek up the turnpike. There were three major theaters, George Street, State Theater, and Crossroads. Crossroads has hit a crossroad.
Crossroads has hit a crossroads.
There are problems. Financially, they have been dark. Is there room for three theaters in Central Jersey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the three theaters do have their own unique missions. And what's great about having three theaters in a row, and frankly, we could have more, is that they feed each other. The audiences feed each other. We've created a great camaraderie among ourselves in ways that we can, cross-promote ourselves and really try to make New Brunswick a destination for arts and culture. So I think it's all great, the more arts organizations that you have in a community. Unfortunately, Crossroads did not produce last year, and that has created some problems, on the block, because no one wants to have a dark theater there. I just recently learned, received an appropriation from the state for $500,000, so hopefully that will help them get out of some of their financial troubles. But even if they don't immediately, George Street and the State Theater need to be looking at that space and trying to find suitable programming for it, because no matter what, it has to be lit. We have to see people going and coming from that theater.
And we, in the state of New Jersey, through the arts programs and funding, have made an investment in that, not only in that facility, but in that theater, and we need to try to nurture that investment and find ways to fund it. Now, the Karma Foundation is one of the foundations that helps in promotion of this type of theater. Critics of funding of the arts. I mean, why should the average taxpayer pay to have the arts funded?
Oh man, I spoke about this at Cinco de Mayo. It is essential to our lives, theater. It can touch you in any number of ways. It can prepare you for life. It is about civilization, it's about literacy, it's about relationships, it's about family, it's about politics. You grow by participating in the arts, by going to the theater, you learn. It's not just all about entertainment. So I think it's absolutely essential. In America, we don't have the same kind of culture that they have in Europe, for example, or the Far East. I mean, there you grow up with this long, long history of culture, and culture includes theater and music and dance and opera. And we are now developing that here in America, but we don't have our unique culture. I suppose Broadway, perhaps, is our unique culture because that was started here, the Broadway musical. But we are now trying to develop culture in all of our communities. There are 300 plus theaters, professional theaters across the country. As many opera houses and ballet companies and museums. And I think that America is starting to recognize the value of culture. But, in rocky economic times, it's not a priority. It has to be. It needs to be, because our children need to learn about dance and music and theater and finding their voice, poetry. And if we don't have it, our lives would be completely empty, I think. And so government has a responsibility to fund the arts, corporations, foundations, individuals. Individuals, anyone who has been touched by the theater or any kind of art form has a responsibility to ensure that it continues to go on.
I think it's important to remind people that when they buy a ticket for a play or a concert or an opera, they are probably funding about 50% of the cost of putting it on, because people think ticket prices are high. And they say, but oh my God, I paid $40 to see this, and that does it. It doesn't. It does half of it. And it's the rest that we have to find support for outside of those ticket prices. Of course, we need ticket buyers. We need people in seats, because there wouldn't be art without them. But people have to remember, too, that the other 50 cents has to come from somewhere on every dollar.
I think in the few minutes that we have remaining, and the time has gone so quickly, again, when you're passionate about theater, and I as well join you in that rank, it goes very quickly. It means that we have to get the next generation and the next generation energized about theater, and that's part of the public outreach, and the Karma Foundation is helping to fund some of that in the schools. what's happening in schools with drama, and are we losing that next group to come up to love and embrace the arts? I mean, what's happening?
I think we've lost a couple of generations of kids who did not have an arts emphasis when they were going to school. And so our audiences now, you see them when you come into our theater or any theater in New Jersey or across the country, are older. And we have not been able to attract the younger people in their 30s and 40s. There's certainly some out there, but not in the numbers that we need. And so recognizing that, I think arts organizations across the country are advocating for more art in the schools. And we all have a responsibility for that. The teachers, our politicians, legislators, all have to ensure that there is some form of arts, whether it's an acting class or music class or whatever, in the schools. And George Street is trying to do its part as well through our touring theater, taking 5 issue-oriented plays into schools from K to 12. We reach about 80,000 kids a year. Hopefully their experience with us will bring them back into our theater or help develop their curiosity to learn more about the theater, either as a performer or being a potential audience member.
You know, Sharon and I are good friends, and when the other evening when you said it was The King and I that energized you, your first theater experience, I found it very fascinating because my love of the theater started with The King and I.
Really?
Because I have a mama that raised us by singing, and at that time playing records of all the Broadway shows.
My
so
father, too.
I am a Broadway baby, and in turn, what has been so neat, you know, whether it's Getting to Know You or I Got the Sun in the Morning and the Moon at Night, which I sing every morning, you know, from Annie Get Your Gun. But now I'm doing the same to my nieces and nephew who think the King and I videotape is called The Kids because they say to me, Aunt Jude, let's watch The Kids. And when I sit and watch it with them and I sing to them and I think about my mom having done the same, and I know that they now have that appreciation, and you know, for birthday treats they go. So I think even in families it's important to keep fostering this and the imagination that they have, and when I watch them imitating it, they just come alive, and you know, this personalities come out of them. So I found it so interesting that The King and I touched 2 lives, and that's what you're talking about touching people's lives, and who knows where that'll lead. It's really, really fascinating. Well, Sharon, the time has just flown by. Again, my congratulations to you and to the Karma Foundation.
Thank you so
on
much.
the Thomas Kane Arts Advocacy Award. And Michael Stotts for keeping up with Sharon Karmazin. You need congratulations on that. And if you haven't been to the George Street Playhouse in New Brunswick, I urge you to go. If you haven't been in a few years, I urge you to get out there and go again. It's affordable, it's near home, it contributes to the cultural life here in Central Jersey, and I guarantee you that you will have a fabulous night at the theater and fall in love again, and to enjoy New Brunswick. It is
Great restaurants,
fabulous.
good eating.
Oh, yeah.
Fabulous.
Huge renaissance
And
going on here.
fabulous.
And also very convenient parking in the area, which is
It's
sometimes
just
a concern for people.
It's just the best. And as always, I hope you join us again for Conversations.